Hey everyone, what's up? R100 here. So today we're going to cover two different scenarios from CloudGoat. If you check the previous videos, I'm just creating different scenarios on different playgrounds. I am vulnerable in the first few videos, and in the continuation of the series, I'm using CloudGoat. And today we're going to focus on two different scenarios on S3 and EC2, but we're going to be involved in different services as well, like Lambda. And yeah, we're gonna exploit SSRF. Also, there's like a web touch of it, so it's gonna be a cool one. So if you're ready, let's jump right in. Alright, so this is our scenario on CloudBridge S3. As always, we're starting or initiating the setup by the comment that's given in here. Which will create all the resources for me. For the resources in the scenario, we have one EC2, one S3. And the scenario starts with the IP address, public IP address of the EC2 server that's running the misconfigured reverse proxy. We're going to start with an anonymous outsider with no access privilege. We will exploit the misconfigured reverse proxy server. We will query the EC2 metadata service. We will get some profile keys and secret key. And then we will grab the and then we will access sensitive data on S3 bucket. So let's see how we're going to do that. First of all, we have the public IP address of the EC2 instance. We're going to run nmap on it to see which ports are open. I'm seeing SSH and HTTP ports are open. I'm just going to run a curl command quickly to see the HTTP port, what's in there. And as you can see, it gives us an error message saying this server is configured to proxy request on the EC2 metadata service. Please modify your request host header and try again. So I'm just going to intercept it with burp and see if I update the host header, what kind of response I'm getting. First, you can add it to the curl with adding a header information, and we're going to basically take the traffic to our localhost port 8080, which is listening via burp on that port. When we do that, we will automatically get that request. You can send it to repeater so we can play on it. After we send it to repeater, we can just change the host to classic metadata API address 169.254, 169.254. So we're gonna do that quickly. And when we do that, we will get all of this API information. So we can just get the endpoint latest as the classic path that we want to follow, the latest, and then metadata API, IAM, security credentials, and then let's see what we're gonna get for the secrets. Let's enumerate it one by one. If you don't have it on top of your head, we can do it like that. Enumerate it. What's the next endpoint we're gonna add? And security credentials for this one, this role, and we're gonna get the credentials, and we can just add it to our AWS credentials file in our profiles current users home directory. We will just call the profile metadata, doesn't matter. We will just use this information for the next exploitation step. So we need the profile name. We're just going to add the secret access key ID, and the token. Let's add it quickly to our credentials file. After we configure the secrets in the credentials file, we can just verify and grab the account ID, the role, and all this information quickly. And you know which command, we used it in the previous videos. It's sts get caller identity, then you attach the profile name that we just created in the credentials file, which was metadata. When we get that, when we run that, we will get the account ID. ARN is given like with the assumed role, all this information. So we can look for the attached policies for this role. The only command that you need is AWS IAM list attached role policies. Again, in the previous videos I explained all these. Then the role name, which we grab from the sts get caller identity commands, and we're gonna paste it in here. I pasted a bit too much after slash, it's not supposed to. I'm gonna delete it in a second. And the profile is metadata. Let's end it like that. Yeah, it's the syntax. I need to delete the part after the slash. Let me remove that quickly. But I will still have an access denied error. So that was our guess, to think that we can check the list attached role policies, but obviously our current user does not have authorization to perform this action. So what we can do is we can use a tool like Paku. That's my favorite. It's very easy to use. You can create a new session and name the session, and after that you can import your keys based on the profile name, or you can just say --all, or you can just mention the profiles, whichever you want to include. And after that there's a command called run im_brute force _permissions, which is going to check for every single permissions that we're allowed to on different services. So we're going to do that, but I'm not going to show the results because it takes a while to get the results. But based on that, I'm going to do my next actions, whichever service and whichever action I'm allowed to. And we can see that I can list on S3 buckets, which my current profile is allowed to. And when I do that, I'm finding a bucket name here. I can enumerate on it more. Let's see. We get object already. Let's see which data is under this bucket, and we see all the CSV files, PNG files, etc. So our goal for this specific scenario was to list the files and download the files, and I can simply do this with the cp command, which is copy. You need to write AWS S3, which is a service name, then action, copy, and then the full URL basically for the S3 bucket, S3 // S3 bucket name / the file name, and then whichever file name you want to save as, and then I will just keep the same name, and then the profile. You can do it for every single file here. I'm just like showing it for the simplicity, but the same syntax, it's just the file name you're downloading is different. So that was it. To summarize, what do? We found the IP address in the beginning somehow we found that. And then we checked the open ports for it, and there was a HTTP port. We checked with curl, and it was given some error message, basically hinted us for changing the host header. I did that. I intercepted the request with burp, and then I realized there is I can like request metadata API information. I got the credentials from there. I added it to my profile. And then I checked with Paku which action I can take, and I saw that I can do multiple actions on S3. And then I checked for the buckets. I found the bucket, I listed it, and then I downloaded the information in it. So that's the summary for this one. I think it's quite easy, simple, but it still shows you how to enumerate the user, what to do with the credentials if you find it, how to enumerate S3 buckets, etc. So that was all for this S3 example. Alright, so we are continuing with the EC2 SSRF. We're initiating the scenario to create the resources. There's one VPC with EC2 in it, one Lambda function, and one S3 bucket. We're starting with the IAM user Solus, and the scenario goal is invoking a Lambda function. So we're starting with this IAM user. We are gonna find some hard-coded credentials. EC2 on an EC2 instance, there's a web application. We will exploit SSRF. From there, we're going to get the metadata API credentials, and then from there, we're going to find an S3 bucket, and using the S3 bucket, we're going to get the keys, which will allow us to invoke a Lambda function. So it's quite simple, actually. It's just requiring a lot of enumeration. So since I set up the environment, I'm just going to get some credentials. I'm going to add it to my AWS credentials file, the classic scenario. That's how we start if the scenario starts with a user. As always, I can just check the command AWS SDC get caller identity to find the username or account ID, this kind of information. As always, I start with Paku to see what my current user can do, what are the allowed actions on which service. That's definitely something that I recommend. The first command is import keys. You can say all, or you can just mention which one you want to import. But if you say import, it will just get everything from your AWS credentials file. And then after that, you're going to run IAM brute force comment to see which actions we are allowed to based on our current IAM profile. So once we do that, we will realize that we can run list functions command on Lambda service. So we're going to do that using our current profile. this comment will give us that output. So we can just do that to list the functions. And we're going to find some functions. And there, in one of the functions, we're going to find environmental variables, which is a very bad practice, but it allows us to see the access key and the secret key and the environmental variables. So, of course, when I find the access key and secret key, as you know, the drill now, you're just going to add it to your AWS credentials file to see what next actions we can do. Of course, the best thing you can do is edit your credentials file and then run Paku again to see the new profile, what this new profile can do on which service, which actions are allowed, so we can do further exploitation. So let's do that quickly. Let's add the credentials to our profile. Again, we can check for the username, account ID by typing AWS STS get caller identity and then attaching the new profile name. We're going to get the username and the account ID like that. Again, we can run Paku, we should, to see which actions we're allowed to, as there are so many services, so many different actions, comments that we can type. We can't just brute force around. It definitely helps to run a tool. Doesn't have to be Paku, you can use another one, but it's my favorite. So you can just run it in the background to see the current profile, what it can do. So again, I will just run Paku. Create a new session or use the existing one, say import keys, and for that one I will just import the new profile that I added. After that, I'm going to run the same command, which is like brute forcing for any permissions. Perfect. It's going to run in the background, and we're going to see that we can check for running EC2 instances, which is the command EC2 describe instances, if you remember from the previous videos. So in this way, we can just check for all EC2 instances by giving the region. What I like to do is I generally filter for the output for any running instances, not the terminated ones or anything else. It gives me more clear picture, as I may have EC2 instances running that's not relevant, or the EC2 instances that are paused, stopped, terminated, so I don't want to see those. That's the command, and I can just like add filter and then name, instance state, and values running, and I can see few EC2 instances running. As you can see, the key name is EC2 SSRF, so I'm assuming that's the one that's relevant to me. I'm also seeing the public IP address, so what I can do on this EC2 instance is check for the open ports with Nmap. Once I do that, I can see that there's an HTTP port open, or you can directly check for port 80 if it's open, but again, that's not the best practice here. It's just like a CTF-ish thing, so I'm assuming HTTP is running on port 80, and I'm verifying it with Nmap. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go to my browser, and I want to see what kind of website is running here, or I can just attach I can run curl command and write a proxy as localhost with port 8080. So I can basically listen to it on my burp, which is running in the background. We're going to intercept automatically when we run this command. Let's run that, and burp, got it. And when we do that, we can just send it to repeater, so we can play around. Let's go to HTTP history, send this to repeater. When we send that, we got kind of an error that says URL must be a string. So you can do fuzzing, but since the error message indicates that there should be a URL, I'm just assuming the parameter is URL, but it doesn't have to be. So you can just like check it out with the fuzzing. So yeah, we got a different error message. So what I can do is I can use my collaborator using Burp Pro. Otherwise, if you have a server, you can listen on that as well with a public IP address. And I'm just going to send it, and I will check on collaborator to see if it actually sent the request. It does. So I'm assuming there's an SSRF here. I'm just going to write the metadata IP, and as you can see, we're getting all the results here. So I will just follow this endpoint latest, which is going to give me more. If you know it already, you can like write it by default, but this is like the safest metadata, and you know what we want, IAM, And then from there, security credentials it should be, but let's see it again. Here we go. We're going to go to security credentials, and then we're going to see which user. Let's send it here. And then we have this role, and then we're going to send it again to get the credentials. Perfect. We have the access key ID, secret access key, and token. You know the drill. We're just going to add these to our AWS credentials file. We are editing here. We also created like a new profile for it, EC2. And we can check it, of course, as always, with AWS S3 get caller identity, and then attach the new profile that we just created, EC2 metadata, I call it, because I get it from an EC2 instance, metadata API. So you can just name it whatever you want. Perfect. Then we get the role and then the account ID. I can use these for further exploitation. What I'm going to do again is I'm going to run Paku to see which actions I'm allowed to with the current profile. We used it multiple times in this video, but again, let's repeat it. We will import keys and the profile that I just created, and then just run IAM permissions to see if we can brute force for any allowed permission on different services. Same old story, there's nothing interesting here. But this takes a while, like 5 minutes or something. So I'm skipping that part, but it basically tells you which service and which actions you're allowed to. And it's going to give us S3 and EC2. And I'm interested in S3, and I can actually list buckets. And I'm going to use ls command, and we'll just attach my profile. When I do that, I'm going to find an S3 bucket. What I can do is I can check, or I can list for files in it. I can say AWS S3 ls and a full URL. You can consider that S3 / bucket name, and then attach the profile in it. And as you can see, there is a file here. What we can do is we can use the cp command, which is basically copying the file to our current working directory. So the syntax is quite straightforward. AWS S3 cp, and then the full URL, the bucket name, and then / the file name that we want to save, and then whichever the name that we want to save the file to our current working directory, and then the profile name. Super straightforward. When we do that, we copy the file. We can just read it with the cat comments, and when we do that, we're gonna find access key ID and secret key. That's great. You know the drill. We're gonna add it to our profile. Our AWS credentials file, you can just type AWS configure, and then profile name, I just called it admin. And I'm going to copy access key and the secret access key. The others I just type OK. And when we do that, again, we can like write STS get caller identity profile, which should be admin. We're going to get the username, account ID again, that can be used for further exploitation. And again, if you run Paku on this profile, we're going to see that we're allowed to do actions on the service Lambda, and the function that we're allowed to is invoke. As you remember, we run a comment before to check the Lambda functions. So that's the purpose here anyway, since it's given in the instructions. We're going to say AWS Lambda invoke function name. We will go back to that previous comment to see what was the function name here. Let's find it in the list. Where was it? Here we go. That was the function name. We're going to copy that, and then the output file that will write the output, we can just call it output.txt. You need to give the region, it's default for this exercise, US East 1, and then profile should be admin that we just created. If it doesn't give any error message, it should be status code 200, lucky us. If you read output.txt, it says you win. So it's like CTF-ish, there's nothing extra you need to do, and we just exploit it in this way. It was a really nice exercise. It included S3, EC2, Lambda, so different services and different exploitation techniques that we can use. We use Paku a lot, but like I said, you can use any other enumeration tool to see for the current profile or the specific profile which service, which action are allowed, permitted on the user or on the profile. So that was all. I hope that you liked the video. Just drop a comment, and if you have any recommendation for other web playgrounds or other exploitation scenarios or CTFs that you want me to check it out, just drop a comment, and see you in the next video. Cheers.